Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
The devoted husband and a proud and loving father, grandfather, great-grandfather.
Remembering Prince Philip, the Queen's husband, dead at 99. Also,
there's no culprit here other than the COVID virus itself.
The Canucks say they followed COVID-19 safety protocols and still hope to finish the season. And
there's not capacity on our roads.
Why Metro Vancouver's post-pandemic commute could be worse than ever before.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
good evening and thanks for joining us. Well, the longest-serving royal consort in British history has died.
Prince Philip, Queen Elizabeth's husband for 73 years, passed away this morning at Windsor Castle. The Duke of Edinburgh was 99.
Margaret Evans begins our coverage tonight from England, where many are mourning his passing.
Flags flying at half-mast across the United Kingdom to mark the death of the Duke of Edinburgh, one of the most enduring figures of the British monarchy, and so too the identity of the nation. Prince Philip's marriage to Queen Elizabeth in 1947 made him the longest-serving consort in British history. His place at her side often in the shadows, but ever present. The British Prime Minister Boris Johnson led the tributes.
It is to Her Majesty and her family that our nation's thoughts must turn today, because they have lost not just a much-loved and highly respected public figure, but a devoted husband and a proud and loving father, grandfather, and, in recent years, great-grandfather.
As per royal tradition, news of Prince Philip's death was posted on the gates of Buckingham Palace, a statement from the Queen announcing with great sorrow the death of her beloved husband, saying he had passed away peacefully this morning at Windsor Castle. In Windsor, people took the long walk to pay tribute to a long life of service and to a long marriage. Recognition from those laying flowers of the role Prince Philip played in supporting the Queen, who has called him her strength and stay.
We thought the least we could do was come and just put some flowers down, just to show the Queen really that, that we're thinking of her, because she must be devastated.
Prince Philip's death comes, of course, less than a month after he was released from hospital in London, where he spent 28 days receiving treatment for an infection and a pre-existing heart condition. Prince Philip retired from public service in 2017. He and the Queen spent most of the past year in Windsor with a reduced staff because of the pandemic. Officials have urged people not to lay flowers to keep crowds down, but local residents wanted to pay their respects personally. Stuart O'Brien owns a pub next to the castle. He says Prince Philip used to ride his team of horses past it regularly, and that his often blunt personality is what people liked about him.
I mean, a lot of people will be upset for the Queen herself, because after 73 years it is a long time to be with someone, and to lose someone like that. But at the same time, he was a character in himself that people did respect.
Even the youngest seemed to understand the impact of his death on the Queen.
I feel really sorry for her, because everyone was really looking forward to his 100th birthday this summer, and then he's not going to be able to do it, and it's just really sad.
She will no doubt take comfort from the crowds outside the castle, but as dusk fell, it felt a lonelier place. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Windsor.
Prince Philip made more royal visits to Canada than any other country. He's been here more than 70 times.
And his first visit was with then Princess Elizabeth 70 years ago this year. Here's Susanna De Silva with some of the Canadians he inspired over the years.
A solemn song in BC's royal capital, a fitting tribute for the Duke of Edinburgh. When Dr. Kenneth Wilson first started at the University of Edinburgh, Prince Philip spoke to his class.
I guess I didn't have any great expectations at the time about what about how he would perform, so to speak. But he gave an excellent address. He got right down to the ground level, to the undergraduate level. It was quite a memorable event in my life.
He helped validate me, believe that I was, that I had a talent.
For New Brunswick artist Christian Corbett, his interaction with Prince Philip was even more profound. Commissioned to sculpt a bust of the Duke, he spent several hours with him.
And he gave me the best piece of advice. He said, keep up the painting. And yeah, I've gone on a completely different path now with my art.
He also influenced 500,000 other Canadians through the Duke of Edinburgh Awards, a program he launched to encourage youth to participate in leadership and physical activities.
I just remember a really pleasant, personal chat.
Eileen Carter received her award from him at this event in Vancouver in 2002. She says the program helped shape her life.
Still involved in aviation, which was a part of the award that I was doing, so it has definitely stayed with me.
He was also committed to military causes across Canada. As a former member himself, he was a colonel-in-chief of the Seaforth Highlanders Infantry Regiment in Vancouver and often visited when he came.
He always made a point of visiting our officers' mess, meeting with our officers, chatting with them, and was very, very interested in us, and that meant an awful lot to us. We're really going to miss him. He was a strong leader.
Decades of memories now being shared across the country. Susanna De Silva, CBC News, Victoria.
And at the legislature in Victoria, the flag is flying at half-mast to mourn the Duke of Edinburgh's passing. Prince Philip visited our province a dozen times over the years, the last visit in 2002, celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Queen's coronation. The flag remains at half-mast until sunset on the day of the Prince's funeral.
And on his many visits over 7 decades, Prince Philip was by the Queen's side and on his own. Mike has a look back now at some of their more notable moments here.
Prince Philip was all smiles as he waved to the crowd in Victoria. It was 2002, here to mark Queen Elizabeth II's Golden Jubilee. In Victoria, the Queen unveiled a stained glass window at the Parliament buildings and dropped the puck at an NHL exhibition game in Vancouver. This would be Prince Philip's final visit to BC. The Duke of Edinburgh was honored at CFB Esquimalt during his 1987 visit and inspected the Royal Guard there. The Prince, who had taken a keen interest in sail training, then took the Robertson II to the Inner Harbor. A lasting legacy from that visit, Prince Philip had the honor of rededicating the province's museum as the Royal BC Museum.
And I only hope that they will actually stick this thing somewhere before it gets pinched.
Their Royal Highnesses go on board a Canadian ship.
In 1951, the 30-year-old Duke of Edinburgh made his first official visit to the West Coast with then Princess Elizabeth a year before she would ascend the throne. The young royals watched First Nations dancers and drummers at Thunderbird Park. The couple, who wed 4 years earlier in 1947, arrived in Vancouver by train. They enjoyed a private retreat in coastal Qualicum Beach. In 1954, the Prince opened the British Empire and Commonwealth Games in Vancouver, visited Victoria, and toured a smelter in Kitimat. His solo visits were often to present the Duke of Edinburgh's award. The Queen and Prince Philip returned to BC in 1971 to mark the province's centenary anniversary of joining Confederation. They brought their daughter, Princess Anne, then 20, along for the trip. The Queen and Prince Philip toured Vancouver, Nanaimo, Vernon, and New Westminster over 3 days back in 1983. The visit marked the beginning of the construction of Canada Place for the upcoming Expo 86 in Vancouver. In 1994, the Queen and Prince Philip attended the Commonwealth Games in Victoria. The Duke of Edinburgh, a staunch conservationist, also flew north to tour a grizzly bear sanctuary north of Prince Rupert.
Thank you for joining us in this moment of great British Columbia pride.
The 1994 Victoria Commonwealth Games marked another major visit. The Queen and Prince Philip drawing large crowds wherever they went. attending major events, sporting venues, and visiting the athletes' village. They even rode in the same black convertible were driven in for their first visit back in 1951. Over a remarkable 7 decades, a dozen visits to BC by Prince Philip.
And we'll have much more to come on the death of Prince Philip coming up.
To breaking news in Saanich now, a driver has rammed through the concrete wall of a Walmart parking lot, trapping store staff inside. This is a live look at that Walmart in Saanich tonight. Police say the elderly female driver careened more than 6 meters into the store, pinning a freezer door closed and trapping the employees inside. Firefighters did manage to rescue the driver, who wasn't seriously injured. The Walmart employees were also safely removed. The incident happened about 4:30 this afternoon, and building inspectors and engineers are on the scene investigating tonight. Well, for the second day in a row, BC has recorded more than 1,200 new COVID-19 cases. There are over 4,100 confirmed cases of variants of concern. 105 of those are active right now. But on a positive note tonight, BC has now administered more than 1 million doses of the COVID-19 vaccine. The province also set a record for most people vaccinated in a day, topping just over 40,000 yesterday.
Well, major BC grocery chain is apologizing after it admits it gave expired COVID vaccines to 10 customers.
I got really upset and I said, why would that happen?
Marie Casas says her husband got an AstraZeneca shot at the Burnaby Kingsway Save-On Monday. He's a janitorial employee with WorkSafe and can't work from home. But relief turned to concern when the pharmacy called the next day to say the vaccine he was given expired the Friday before. Casas was told he'll get another shot 28 days after he received the first expired dose, then wait another 4 months before his final shot. His wife says Save-On staff told her medications don't expire overnight, but she's still worried.
When you are a health professional, that's expected of you, that you should be vigilant in what you give to your patients. I was thinking, you let this vial of medication expire. There are a lot of people out there who are very, very much in need of this.
In a statement, Save-On Foods says, we understand the concern with receiving an expired vaccine is the relative effectiveness of the vaccine, and we have contacted the medical health officer and followed the guidance on how to continue vaccination of these customers so they are protected from COVID-19. BC's health ministry says guidelines are that vaccines should be used before they expire, but it wouldn't say if getting an expired vaccine is a health concern.
Testing students for COVID-19 just got a little easier, at least for families in the Vancouver School District. BC's Children's Hospital is supplying take-home swish, gargle, and spit kits for students showing symptoms at school.
I wouldn't say this keeps the schools open, but I think certainly facilitating testing when a child becomes symptomatic at school is one way of making sure that we recognize if there is unrecognized transmission. That's certainly one of the ways to do that.
Students showing symptoms in class will be asked to do at-home testing with their parents. The vials should be dropped off at any Life Labs location or at Children's Hospital. 1,200 kits are available in VSB schools right now, with more expected for students across the province.
The Vancouver Canucks team doctor says the player who first contracted COVID-19 and then brought it into the club acted within the rules.
And club officials say they still plan to play the rest of their scheduled games if they're allowed. Our Dan Burr joins us live with more on this tonight. First of all, Dan, how are the players doing?
The team says thankfully none of them have had to be hospitalized, and they believe they're starting to recover, though worryingly some family members are still getting sick. 21 Canucks players and 4 staff members have tested positive for COVID variant. The team has confirmed one person brought it into the club from somewhere in the community, but their doctor stresses that person didn't break any rules.
We know that the individual had gone to a place within the guidelines and That place subsequently was discovered to have cases of COVID, and that's how it got into our organization. And we've made it very clear within our group that there's no culprit here other than the COVID virus itself.
Okay, fair enough. Dan, the NHL season has already been shortened because of the pandemic. So what are the chances that Canucks will play any more games?
First, Dr. Bouvard notes that the provincial public health officials will have to approve any back-to-work plan for the team. 6 Canucks games have already been postponed, and they haven't played yet this month, in fact. The next scheduled game is on Monday in Edmonton, but it's still not clear if that will happen. Still, General Manager Jim Benning says the plan is to play at some point.
My conversations with the league are that we're going to continue with our schedule here at some point, and we're going to play all 56 games. So.
Right now, the Canucks trail Montreal by 8 points for the final playoff spot. Anita, Mike?
All right, Dan, thanks very much. Dan Burritt with us live tonight. Well, traffic volume on 3 major bridges in the Lower Mainland are close to pre-pandemic levels, despite the fact that many people now work from home.
And as Joel Ballard reports, experts warn traffic could get worse.
My primary mode of transportation was bus.
That's how Home Depot employee Brett Langdo always got to work. But once the pandemic hit, he ditched the bus.
A large part of it was due to fear. I didn't want to be in an enclosed space with a bunch of other people.
One of the reasons the Lower Mainland's roads are seeing high levels of traffic. Data from TransLink shows that crossings on 3 major bridges are within 10% of pre-COVID volume. On the Patillo Bridge, there was a definitive drop in crossings in the first few months of the pandemic, but traffic volume quickly rebounded. Now there's about a 5% decrease in vehicle volume. In March, the Golden Ears Bridge saw its highest number of crossings since August 2019. And on the Knight Street Bridge, there were 941,066 crossings in February, a decrease of only 9% compared to the previous year.
A lot of people did shift their travel mode, so people who had choices stopped using transit.
Most turned to cars. Winters says travel behaviors generally only shift due to big disruptions in people's lives. Think buying a house, finding a new romantic partner, retiring, or a global pandemic.
Kind of like interruption and disruption that we saw with the COVID lockdown is completely unprecedented.
But while COVID-19 shifted a majority of transit riders to vehicles, she's not convinced vaccinations will be a big enough event to push them back to transit, meaning the return to in-office work and in-class studies could lead to even higher rates of congestion.
There's not capacity on our roads. We were in a state of congestion that was having sort of economic and social impacts pre-COVID.
Congestion levels and ridership wariness are something the team at TransLink are closely watching.
But as congestion comes back, you pointed out that we're already seeing in the 90%. That is one of the factors that it's more convenient to take your bike, more convenient to walk if you can, or to jump on transit.
And TransLink is preparing a public campaign to welcome back riders and convince them it's safe.
Just like we made a push last spring when we put in all these measures, we'll start that once it's clear that it's free to go back to those sort of shared spaces.
But for Langdo, it all comes down to the numbers.
If we have a transmission rate that's going up, I would be hesitant to get on the bus still.
Joel Ballard, CBC News, Vancouver.
A Vancouver Island woman is delighted to learn the father she never knew will be honored with a memorial in England for his heroism during the Second World War.
Robert Coventry was born in Oak Bay and flew for the Royal Air Force. As Rafferty Baker reports, his plane crashed near Gloucester, but not before he managed to steer it away from a school full of children, saving their lives.
I knew that the plane had crashed.
Anne Underhill's father's name is carved into a memorial in Oak Bay for local residents who died in the Second World War. She'd heard stories of her father's death, a training mission. The Bristol Blenheim bomber Flight Lieutenant Robert Coventry was piloting, going down in Quedgeley, near Gloucester. Locals managing to pull the 2 other crewmen from the flaming wreckage.
Basically, that was a story that I had as a child, you know.
What she'd never been told, until she was recently contacted by a BBC reporter, is that her father had died after managing to steer the doomed bomber away from a busy schoolhouse.
I know absolutely nothing of my father except the way he died, because I was 10 months old when he was killed.
A campaign in Quedgeley has resulted in plans for a new memorial near the crash site. A plaque will honor Coventry's ultimate sacrifice and the many lives he saved before losing his own.
If the plane had actually hit the school on that day, Mum would have died, and therefore I would never have been born.
Helen Tracy's mother, Margaret Kale, was a 6-year-old student at the school when the crash happened in September 1940. She says she owes her life to Robert Coventry.
There were flames in the cockpit, you know, and I'm almost reliving this now, telling you, really.
Peter Hickman was 10 years old at the time.
I can remember running across these fields, and of course there was the plane burning, and we stood there absolutely shocked. You know, you were unable to do anything. You couldn't get near it.
Quedgeley Town Council has commissioned the new memorial. An unveiling ceremony is planned for September.
I think it's absolutely extraordinary and wonderful. And my mother must be dancing around up there, sort of, yeah, just to get the recognition. It means a lot to me, and I would love to be able to be there, but who knows?
The pandemic may thwart any overseas travel, but Underhill may soon get the chance to visit another memorial to the father she never knew. Rafferty Baker, CBC News, Vancouver.
The Vancouver Park Board has a new deadline for all tents in Strathcona Park to be removed. Tent inhabitants now have until 10 a.m. on Friday, April 30th to relocate. It's an extension of the February order to restrict temporary shelters to the park's west side. Once the tents are cleared, a fence will be put up to close off the area and rehabilitate the park. Some campers say they are hoping the order comes with housing accommodation for the park's residents.
Well, they can't push us out of here. I mean, where are we going to go? To start somewhere else, right? That's what it'll be. Another park, another location that'll just be turned into one of these.
BC Housing and the City of Vancouver say they are working on providing accommodation, and they are actively buying housing and creating temporary spots for the campers.
The weekend is here. Johanna Wagstaffe is here. Popped outside for a little bit earlier this afternoon. It was pretty blustery. Does that mean we're getting assistance in clearing this out?
Yes, it does. That wind is our assistance on the good one, Mike. Yeah, the front end.
Mike wants to be a weather person.
I actually really like it.
In his past life, he was a weather person.
I'm looking for an intern, so let's see here. I think he'd make the cut. But you're right. I'm impressed. The cold front that is moving through as we speak brought some very gusty southeasterly winds right about the time you stepped out. 40 to 50 kilometer per hour gusts. We're still waiting for the back end of the cold front, but when it moves through, that is going to bring us clearing skies. Let me show you what it looks like on the radar. Don't just take it from me and Mike. The rain there, you can see still coming in for Metro Vancouver, just panning you back a little bit. There's the edge of the front. So you're going to notice those southeasterly winds switching, coming in from the west in the next couple of hours. And that will be the end of the rain. That low pressure system directing both rain and snow for the mountain passes. We still have snowfall warnings for the Coquihalla, Hope to Merritt, and winter storm warnings all the way up on the top end of that front in through the Peace. But I will take you through to the sunshine and a very decent spring forecast coming up.
All right. Thanks, Johanna. And a reminder, you can always watch this newscast live on CBC Gem.
And CBC Vancouver is also on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram.
He was the Queen's consort for over 70 years. We look back at the highs and lows of the life of Prince Philip coming up.
.23, thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream tonight. Well, for the past year, a 9-year-old girl from Mississauga has been helping vulnerable people stay home and safe during the pandemic.
As Chris Glover explains, it's an initiative that started small but is now helping people across Ontario.
With the cookies that they asked for.
9-year-old Hannah Fatima and her dad check over their next delivery. They've been getting the essentials to seniors ever since the COVID pandemic lockdown started last spring, when the Mississauga child spotted an elderly woman struggling at the grocery store, and she and her dad helped the senior to her car.
When I saw the elderly person,
I thought that was my opportunity to go and help somebody, because whenever you get a chance to be helpful and kind, you just go and do it without thinking about it much, and everybody should do that too.
The simple gesture sparked a passion inside her, at first delivering groceries to a couple of seniors on her street. That quickly snowballed into a fleet of kindness, now called the Good Neighbor Project.
It just started spreading, and when we made it first public on Facebook, and within 24 hours we got like 600 people who said that they are available to help for this project.
Wow, spreading faster than COVID.
Yeah, spreading much faster than at least in the beginning. Yeah, for sure, yeah. I don't have the grocery number with me.
The team of volunteers is now helping thousands of people across the GTA and in Ottawa and London too.
There's over 6,000 volunteers, and we have done over 9,000 deliveries now. Some people delivered for over 200 times.
Okay, this is huge. How do you feel about that?
It's really great to see people wanting to help people in their community.
Their mission is to get groceries to seniors and other vulnerable people so they don't have to risk catching the virus.
Because 73 years old with 2 stents, it's not a joke. So we always stay home.
Ahmed Al-Rufai is blown away by his tiny neighbor.
She really behaves more than her age. She is a blessing in our neighborhood.
Her dad thinks so too.
It shows that, like, you just need to have that a thought in your heart to help out and give back to the community.
But what does this 9-year-old fueled by kindness plan to do when she grows up?
That's a good question.
For the girl that has all the answers. Hannah's not committing to any specific future, but she just hopes she can keep inspiring others.
When I go, somebody has to know it and carry it down to the next generations. So I want to be somebody who teaches others about the good.
Chris Glover, CBC News, Mississauga.
I'm sure she has a bright future and will be able to do anything. Love all these stories of kids who are, doing so much kindness, putting out so much kindness out there during the pandemic.
She is a smart one for sure. Okay, coming up, we've got more on the death of Prince Philip from across the country and around the world. Stay with us. Be right back. Well, Prince Philip will certainly be remembered for his ambition and selflessness over the decades of history-making events.
As tributes continue to pour in, Renee Filipponi has this look at the Duke of Edinburgh's early years and how he developed his role in public life.
Who, with his hands between the hands of the Queen, becomes her liege man of life and limb.
For Britain's longest reigning monarch, he was the one constant witness.
And kisses her upon the left cheek.
For more than 7 decades, Prince Philip kept watch as Elizabeth transformed from princess to queen, grew from young bride to great-grandmother and the world's longest reigning living monarch. Along the way, he too broke records. He is the longest-serving British royal consort, for the Queen a near constant shadow, and though always a step behind, his access and insight were unrivaled. In some ways, he was born to play that role. The young Prince Philip was brought up in a royal household, born on a Greek island and in line to the Greek throne. But then the monarchy was overthrown. His family was rescued by a Royal Navy ship sent by George V. At age 7, his parents separated and his mother was sent to a psychiatric clinic. He was shuffled between relatives and boarding schools, and from the loneliness, he learned to care for himself.
So all of that, I think, made him a very independent person and a man who had to very much live on his wits.
He did well in the Navy, which gave him the stability he craved.
At that time, I was virtually stateless, I think. I had a Danish passport, but the Navy said that they'd accept me. And so I went into the Navy, I think certainly at the instigation of my uncle, Lord Mountbatten.
Philip, as a young man, was popular. It was his uncle, Lord Louis Mountbatten, who introduced him to his third cousin, Elizabeth. For her, the prince would give up his Greek title and church. In 1947, as a new British citizen, the prince had successfully wooed the princess and the nation.
Again and again, the people called for Elizabeth and Philip.
With the coronation, there was more to give up. This time, his Navy career. He would devote his life to supporting the British monarch.
He was perfectly able to cope with that. And although people always said how difficult it must have been for him to walk a step behind the Queen, I don't think that concerned him one bit.
Early on, he established the Duke of Edinburgh Award for Youth. Thousands participated in the UK and in Canada, and the popular award became his most important solo accomplishment. Even as a new husband, there were rumors of affairs, certainly many a night out. Rumors of a marital rift were never confirmed. As a father, he was loving but tough. Early on, he had a strained relationship with his firstborn, Prince Charles, who was far meeker than his father.
I think he's always been hoping to, earn his father's admiration. In fact, I don't think that Prince Charles ever quite his parents never quite got it right with him.
For the Queen, his counsel and company were indispensable. They cut a figure of unity and stability in a family where marriages failed too often.
He is someone who doesn't take easily to compliments, but he has quite simply been my strength and stay all these years.
I think it was, it's fair to say that Queen Victoria lost Prince Albert, who was her great support, at a very young age, and the Queen was very lucky to have had him all those years.
He officially wrapped up his royal career with an event with the Royal Marines in 2017. Now officially away from the spotlight, he was still supporting the Queen and his growing family. The fiercely independent prince still made headlines. Behind the wheel, he was in a car crash and had to hand over his license. In the years before his death, the once powerful voice in the royal family fading into the background, occasionally spotted enjoying his private time. He was the oldest male British royal to ever live, and this monarchy's chief eyewitness after the Queen herself. Renee Filipponi, CBC News, London.
Now, the relationship between the Crown and Indigenous people in Canada has sometimes been a complicated one.
And as Karen Pauls explains, even though he made racist comments publicly, some Indigenous people are remembering the man and sending their condolences to the grieving family.
During their many royal visits, the Queen and Prince Philip have recognized the unique relationship between the Crown and Indigenous people.
Ever since Europeans began to penetrate central and western Canada, it has been a story of turbulence and change.
During this 1994 visit, celebrating the creation of a new Inuit territory, then Dene National Chief Bill Erasmus made some pointed comments to the Queen.
But because of the policies, your crown has continually been sullied and dishonored.
He followed that up with a more private and relaxed conversation with Prince Philip.
We need to continue that relationship. It's not just symbolic.
This Inuit bush pilot also enjoyed talking to the prince when he'd stopped to refuel his private plane in the late 70s and early 80s. Johnny May even once sent some Arctic char back to England with him.
He was flying through again and he said, "Johnny May, I have a message from the missus. She enjoyed the Arctic char immensely."
May remembers Philip's sense of humor.
I don't want to go public on some of it, but just regular pilot talk, a few jokes here and there.
Some of Philip's comments weren't seen as funny, but racist. In 2002, on a visit to Australia with the Queen, he asked a group of Indigenous people, "Do you still throw spears at each other?" In 1995, he asked a Scottish driving instructor, "How do you keep the natives off the booze long enough to pass the test?" During his time as National Chief, Sean Atleo met Prince Charles, the Queen, and Prince Philip.
And so I know like a lot of people's hearts will go out to the family.
Atleo says today Prince Philip should be remembered for his near century of public service. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Winnipeg.
As COVID numbers swell across the country, Ontario remains Canada's hotspot. And now hospitals are starting to buckle under the strain. That's next.
The Royal Yacht Britannia, on board Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip. This was less than an hour ago as Britannia entered Victoria Harbor with dozens of smaller local escorts. This is Britannia now, tied up at dockside here in downtown Victoria. In just a few moments, the royal couple will disembark to begin a 4-day visit to British Columbia. The royal barge at the front of the barge there, flying the royal standard, of course. Now, let's see if we can just get a glimpse of the Queen. Prince Philip, of course. There, I think we can see the Queen.
Wisely undercover. Doesn't want to go out into that rain unless she has to, until she has to.
Royal wave to the thousands who are thronging the inner harbor area here in Victoria. On arrival, momentarily, just a few seconds from the front of the BC legislature, or the Parliament buildings, as they're called here. Every province is different. Many provinces calling it a legislature. Here in BC, they call it their own Parliament buildings, of course. Fly past as the Queen arrives on land in Victoria, met by the Governor General and Mrs. Schreier, as you can see there.
And now greeting Senator and Mrs. Austin.
Senator Austin is here representing the Prime Minister today. The Prime Minister will be flying into Victoria later on this evening. Premier Bill Bennett of BC and Mrs. Bennett, the official welcoming party to meet the royal couple as they will now begin the walk up to the front of the British Columbia's Parliament buildings. The Queen and Prince Philip now in Canada for the first time in almost a year, under umbrella. Not a hard downpour by any stretch of the imagination. A light drizzle, perhaps, Cecilia, welcome compared with, as you were mentioning earlier, some of the other weather that she's seen on this trip up the West Coast.
I think it is, certainly. These people have been waiting for 1, 2, some of them up to 3 hours just to catch a glimpse of the Queen. They've been lining the seawall, lining her entire route up to the legislative grounds.
It really is an amazing turnout here. Victoria, a city of almost 250,000 people, but there, of course, the estimates will be guessed at all day as to just how many are here in the harbor area, but there's got to be in the 20,000 to 30,000 range at least, in spite of this weather.
Here are some of the stories we're following tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
A devoted husband and a proud and loving father, grandfather, great-grandfather.
Prince Philip, Queen Elizabeth's husband, has died at the age of 99. He was the longest-serving royal consort in British history. His death comes more than 3.5 years after he formally stepped back from public life.
The doctor for the Vancouver Canucks says the player who first got COVID-19 and then brought it into the team acted within NHL and provincial health protocols. 21 Canucks players and 4 staff members have tested positive for a variant of the virus. No one on the team has been hospitalized to date, but so far 6 games have been postponed.
Kind of like interruption and disruption that we saw with the COVID lockdown is completely unprecedented.
There are warnings about how bad traffic could be once life starts to shift back to normal in Metro Vancouver. Since the start of the pandemic, a lot of people stopped taking transit out of concern about getting infected. Some experts don't think that hesitancy will go away soon after COVID. And if people return to work, the roadways could see congestion like never before.
New cases, COVID cases in Ontario broke a frightening single-day record today. And as Katie Nicholson tells us, the province has issued emergency orders deploying government health workers to hospitals.
A gallbladder attack sent Rahul Tandon to hospital last month.
The pain was excruciating. I could not sit, I could not stand.
He was about to go under the knife. Now he'll have to wait.
Yeah, and it just got cancelled today.
There was already a backlog of 250,000 necessary operations. Now, only emergency surgeries for strokes, heart attacks, cancer, and trauma are a go. Elective and non-emergency surgeries like hip and knee replacements on hold. All to make space in ICUs, bracing for the mounting COVID wave. A grim sign of what's to come. Last night, a letter from the body that governs doctors as protocols are being drawn up on who gets care and who doesn't. These are extraordinary times that require extraordinary decision-making.
It hits hard and it hits in the gut. Physicians go into medicine first and foremost because we want to help people. And we hold that duty sacred. The idea that we may have to triage access to care based on anything other than medical need and patient wishes, that's not what any of us signed up for.
But from the Premier, an almost rosy view.
If you look around the world, Ontario's doing pretty well right now.
And in fact,
not so, says this doctor.
I think there was a time that we could compare ourselves to our southern neighbors and think that we are in pretty good shape. And I think that time has passed.
The time now, doctors beg, is just to stay home. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Toronto.
The pandemic has changed life for everyone in every way, but for those who are religious, it has also meant no in-person services at churches, synagogues, gurdwaras, or anywhere else. So let's talk about that. How has the lack of in-person service worked or perhaps not worked? Darren Botha is our guest tonight. He's a pastor from Chilliwack's Mountain View Church. And among the many challenges the pandemic has brought upon his work, well, he also had COVID in January. Darren, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me, Anita.
Darren, you've been giving your sermons now through Zoom. How specifically has that been different for you and for the congregation?
You know, Anita, for years, we just met in person, and there is no replacement for being in the same room as someone as you share with them, or as you speak to them, or as you pray for them. But we've had it's just been incredible over this time of this pandemic to be able to connect with people virtually. And we have a number of people who are just not comfortable going online and watching sermons via Zoom or following us on Facebook Live or YouTube. And so there are people who we've missed out on reaching and just making sure that they're cared for. So it certainly has its pros and its cons.
And you've been pretty outspoken about religious groups needing to follow health guidelines. Have you had anyone push back on that?
Absolutely. I wrote an article for the Chilliwack Progress, and I got a number of responses from people who wouldn't go to church or say they wouldn't go to church, and they were very encouraging and saying it was a new perspective. And then I got a number of responses where I was dragged over the coals and threatened to be hauled and thrown out of town for my statements.
How do you deal with that? You know, there's so many different religions and so many different groups, and some people think one way, some people think another. How do you cope with that?
I try and explain to people that there is a vast difference in being arrested for your beliefs and being arrested for your behaviors. Those two concepts are worlds apart, and we must not conflate them. And in a time such as the pandemic, as Christians, I believe we are called to not look out for our own interests, but look out for the interests of others, that we should consider others before we consider ourselves.
Okay, a little bit of a different direction here, but I do want to touch on this. You had COVID in January, but you've also had cancer, and you say COVID is worse. Can you tell us why? What was it like?
Yeah, I said to my wife after I recovered, I said, I've had the unholy trinity of cancer, chemotherapy, and COVID was the worst. And I think it was the worst because it affected every part of my being, not just my body. I experienced incredible fatigue, body aches, high temperatures. I've had pneumonia before. The cancer and chemotherapy weakened my immune system, and I had pneumonia a number of times, and that felt like an elephant sitting on my chest, whereas COVID felt like an elephant trying to crash its way out of my chest. But it also affected me cognitively. I was amazed at how it affected my ability to think and reason and process. And for weeks, I would forget people's names. I couldn't remember what I needed to do. I couldn't fulfill the tasks that I'd planned for the day.
Wow, that sounds like a terrifying experience. We are very glad that you are doing much better now. Darren Botha, pastor at Chilliwack's Mountain View Church, thank you.
Thank you, Anita.
The small Caribbean island of St. Vincent is being rocked by volcanic eruptions, with thousands forced to flee. The latest from the island and what they can expect next coming up.
And at 6:45, a live look, BC Place. A few raindrops on the camera there. Maybe we should just forget about that. What happened today? The rain? Nope, it's gone. Focus on a long stretch of sunshine coming up. Joe is here to tell us about it next.
The story of the eel migration is actually a small miracle. Every fall, eels swim out from rivers and streams along the east coast of North America to the Sargasso Sea, where they spawn, lay eggs, and then die. When the babies hatch, ocean currents carry them to inland freshwater, where they make their way to Nova Scotia and New Brunswick in the Elver stage of their life cycle. There they'll stay for anywhere between 10 to 25 years before returning to the Sargasso Sea to complete the circle of life. That is if they don't get caught first.
Well, there's two methods we use to fish. The non-active, the fyke nets, that's fishing 24 hours a day. We keep it up and we only empty it once a day. The second method we use, dip netting. You're in the water, you got your chest waders on, you got your headlight on, and you're catching as many as you can with your dip net. All of this takes place at night. They're a nocturnal creature. When we have them in our holding facility, I even talk to them. You guys will be just fine. You guys are going to a nice place. Don't worry, they're not going to eat you right off the bat. And the funny part is we wrapped them up in a newspaper, so what I like to do, I like to put the letter in upright so at least they can read something on their way over.
Well, volcanic eruptions have rocked the island of St. Vincent in the Caribbean.
Mommy, like a crazy woman.
An explosive eruption this morning sent a column of ash 10 kilometers into the sky. There have been smaller eruptions throughout the day, and it's expected there will be more. The volcano's been showing signs of life for some time, and evacuation efforts were fortunately already underway. Some 16,000 people live in the danger zone, but there are no reports of injuries or deaths. The volcano last erupted 42 years ago.
And meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now. Johanna, you've probably been watching that volcano explosion pretty carefully, I imagine.
Yes. In fact, it was about 24 hours ago that seismologists for the area actually sent those evacuation alerts out because of the increased seismic activity. So what has been dormant since 1979 is now active, and it might be weeks to months before those eruptions settle down. Seismologists and volcanologists are analyzing the plume or the chamber of magma under that volcano as we speak, but those evacuees might be out of their homes for months. So we'll be watching this story closely, and we'll probably have more updates next week. I want to take you to our big weather story, which is warming temperatures and clearing skies over the long-range forecast. Here's a look at the cross Canada temperatures. 15 right now and through Toronto. That's really where we're seeing the heat. 16 and through Ottawa and Montreal. It has been chilly for the start of the spring season here on the West Coast. Here's a big picture look at our air mass over the next week or so. So see those darker white colors? That's the cooler air mass in place, and it is going to be in place for the next couple of days. But as I take you through the week ahead, notice the warmer greens start to build in. Here's Thursday, here's Friday. That's when we're talking mid to high teen temperatures for Vancouver. For the southern interior, we'll be hitting the low 20s. So it's going to look very different across the province in just a few days. Hard to believe with snow falling at SFU this morning, with snowfall warnings in place for the mountain passes. That cold front is a cold front, and it is dragging down that cooler air. So it is going to be a cooler weekend. We're struggling to hit the double digits tomorrow across the south coast, but that high pressure and those northwesterly winds will be clearing things out very nicely for a sunny Saturday and a sunny Sunday. It really won't be until early next week that we'll start to see those temperatures start to climb. A look at the province tomorrow. Kelowna, it might take until the afternoon for you to clear out. Same story in through Cranbrook. Snow down to valley floors tonight. So even Kelowna and parts of the Kootenays getting those chilly temperatures and the snow before we get the sunshine. There's a quick look at that warm up through Sunday. Already starting to see those teen temperatures sneak in to Soyuz. There's our forecast. Beautiful sunny skies. We'll be climbing through the week, ending off in the high teens, Mike and Anita, for the end of the week. Of course, this is the start of spring runoff, and we've got above seasonal snowpack, so I'll be watching that closely. But I think we can enjoy guilt-free the start to spring, at least for a few days.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
American rapper and actor DMX has died at the age of 50. The performer's real name was Earl Simmons. He died at a New York hospital with his family at his side 5 days after suffering a heart attack. He was known for his gritty lyrics as well as his battles with substance abuse and run-ins with the law. DMX sold millions of albums and collaborated with hip-hop legends such as Jay-Z and LL Cool J. He also appeared in movies such as Cradle to the Grave and Romeo Must Die.
When Emily Carr packed up its Granville Island campus and moved, some wondered what would happen to the space, how the arts are returning to the island. Next.
Mysterious, almost mythical, the narwhal has long been a source of food and legend for Inuit in the far north. Now it's telling us a story about the world we live in. Environmental scientist Jean-Pierre Desforges and a team of international scientists studied narwhal tusks.
So much like the rings in a tree, the narwhal tusk grows the same way.
Each ring represents 1 year of growth. By studying those rings, Deforge and researchers from Denmark and Greenland were able to determine what was happening with their diets, specifically accumulations of mercury, a toxin that can lead to neurological damage. With climate change and the loss of sea ice since the 90s, the narwhal diet changed. They began eating different types of fish. Deforge and his colleagues thought it would lead to lower levels of mercury in the mammals. They found the opposite. Mercury levels in the tusks actually rose.
Humans are just releasing more mercury into the world through things like fossil fuel combustion, coal combustion, and gold mining and things like that are releasing mercury, and it's making its way to the Arctic. And this is likely increasing exposure to top predators like narwhal.
And all this, Deforge fears, could have an impact on the Inuit in the north who still hunt the animals.
A lot of communities that still hunt narwhal and eat them. So we are worried about their exposure to mercury. And we have seen from other studies that in areas that hunt narwhal heavily, often the risk of mercury toxicity can be quite high.
Deforge speculates that with the warming environment, there is more sea ice, snow, and permafrost that is melting, and that is releasing previously stored mercury into the environment. He says it's going from a form that was inactive into a form that could end up in the food chain. Elias Aboud, CBC News, Montreal.
We're pretty excited we're able to release a male mallard, and a cackling goose that we have overwintered. The two of them actually spent the winter together, and they got along famously, actually.
Bedfellows, yeah.
Yeah. But we're pretty happy that we're able to let them go today, and now they can just kind of carry on with their life from this point forward. I expect the cackling goose will probably try to keep going farther north because they generally don't stay in this area. And the mallard, well, hopefully he'll find a girlfriend. We wish them well.
Spring has sprung, so it is a good time to release these two, to give them the opportunity to find mates and go on with their business, but also brings up something else. You know, right now in Edmonton and surrounding area is a time where a lot of waterfowl have returned from down south, and they're jockeying for the best breeding grounds, looking for nesting sites, and it's a time when we have to really sort of examine what's going to happen over the next month or so. So if these birds are trying to nest on your balcony or maybe in front of your business, now is the time to deter them before they establish their nesting sites. Because once established, these federally protected birds are there to stay, at least for a month or so, until the eggs hatch and the babies are born and they take them to the nearest water source. So you want to deter these guys, chase them off before they build.
Well, ever since Emily Carr University moved from Granville Island, the old campus saw little art happening behind its doors.
But now the nonprofit Arts Umbrella has set up shop and is ready to welcome young artists to explore art, dance, theater, and more. Take a look.
Well, we are so excited at Arts Umbrella to be finally in our new home on Granville Island after many years of preparation and planning. This building, first off, is close to 4 times the size of our current space on Granville Island. So we are just able to really spread our wings within each of the disciplines. There is a 132-seat theater, a performance theater with a 1,500 square foot sprung floor stage. Exhibition gallery for young people right in the main foyer of the building. On the 3rd floor, we have for the very first time a set design scene shop. I think one of the greatest areas of growth in this new building will be in our Media Arts Hub. We will have the opportunity where high school students will be able to come to Arts Umbrella and have an intensive experience learning about gaming and learning about this new world, really, for arts and arts education.
No animal shall wear clothes.
Students who come to Arts Umbrella can take art and design, media arts, architecture, painting and drawing, mixed media sculpture. There is theater, film, and music, and dance. With this new building, within the first 3 to 5 years, we will see approximately 15,000 young people accessing this building in a single year. And this has been a real model where government, corporate, and the private sector, individuals and foundations have come together to really do something really epic for the benefit of children and youth. We encourage people to go onto our website and learn about programs, and hopefully we'll even see you on April 10th.
Nice to see the arts back on Granville Island.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's an amazing space, and I'm certain the arts will continue to flourish there.
For sure.
Certain. Okay, that's all the time we have tonight. Dan's here at 11 after the National. We're going to leave you this evening with images of Prince Philip, who died at Windsor Castle this morning at the age of 99. Thanks for watching. Have a great weekend.